that we've said it the last few times, and we know, having you guys been in the game for so long, but as we've watched the game progress since following you guys, but like, is this a new level of standard in terms of where the game is going, the WSL growing again, and the Championship?
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, I mean, the investment is unreal, you know, especially at the top level of the game, the money going into the quality on the pitch and obviously the resources. I think there's still a ways to go. I think there's still like parity that needs to happen between the clubs sort of sitting in the middle and the bottom of that top WSL. And obviously the Championship are trying to be more professional. But generally, I think in terms of attendances, you're looking at Arsenal and the Emirates and Chelsea playing at Stamford Bridge and Man United at Old Trafford. Like, clubs are starting to really support their women's teams. And I think that's obviously helping the product grow. But, you know, I think we wish it could happen sooner.
Absolutely. But I don't know if I'll be able to compete actually now. I'm past it a bit, but yeah. But I totally agree with what you're saying there. But I fear that the top 3-4 clubs might be breaking away. If you look at like the investment they've got, like the salaries that their players have got on, and the players that they're attracting compared to teams at the middle and the bottom. So it's like, how do we balance that out? Obviously, we've got the new co coming on board, but how do we benefit from that? How will we make it work? How will we make it an even playing field is what I want to know.
Well, I just think that's the challenge, isn't it? Is that the football kind of culture is every club, it has its own self-interest and they want to build as quickly and as success as quickly as possible. So are they looking at the wider picture, the wider competition? And obviously clubs get left behind if they can't marry up to that. And they're going to try and look at different avenues to try and compete to do that. But I think it's going to be difficult because we're seeing with the professional game, the way it's going, that's just something that happens. And I think it will be up to NUCO to think about creative ways to make sure that they can keep the competition as competitive and as fair as possible.
So do you think now, Anita, that we're going to see potentially what we've heard rumoured in the last couple of years, that there might be maybe no relegations from the WSL at some point and then maybe 2 promotions from the Championship in order to grow the WSL and then get more teams into the Championship? Is that going to happen at some point?
I think that is something that potentially could happen. And I think it's always important to place context as well on the women's game and where it is, you know. Ultimately, everyone would love it to be like the Men's Premier League one day and all of that, but it's at a stage now where it's growing so quickly and we need the infrastructure and everything to grow at the same speed with the same quality around the quality on the pitch. And if that requires us getting more clubs into the top division with more competitive games, I think it will benefit everybody, you know, not just the ownership, the players, the fans, experience as well, the clubs around the country, that it's not just, you know, predominantly southern clubs or predominantly northern clubs, it's the northeast, northwest, it's everywhere covering geographically. But ultimately, I think, you know, it's about increasing games, quality of games for players. You know, we talk about the competitions they play in now, all the cup games, Champions League in Europe, international games. They need that exposure, and they need that exposure physically, I think, to cope with the demands of a growing game with a growing fixture, you know, calendar as well.
It's something we see, isn't it, with the Champions League as well? The teams going to the Champions League, not having then that level of experience, then that's it, they're out. But then to try to get a Europa League or something involved in the women's game would be great in time.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that we're another while away from that.
I want it now.
We can't have it yet. We can't have it, not yet. No, patience, please. But like we're saying, like players having to cope with the demands of these games too. Even that is the teams like your Arsenal, Chelsea's, Man City's that are maybe competing in Champions League, so they've got those fixtures. And I feel like teams at the other end of the table don't have enough fixtures. So it's so all over the place. And then you've got the teams that are in the Champions League that are playing a lot of fixtures that'll go all the way to finals, semi-finals. There's a lot more demand in their bodies, but I think medically, teams don't have enough staff and behind the scenes to cope with the demands. You look at the men's game and you've got like a player, you're a player, you've got probably a doctor, you've got a masseuse, you've got a sports therapist, you've got a physio, you've got a nutritionist, you've got access to everything.
One-to-one care.
Do you know, one-to-one? Yeah, so we're miles off that. So how will females be able to cope with the demands now too?
Yeah.
It's so interesting, but it's not a quick fix.
It isn't. It's something that's going to take time, and it's also about what are we collectively in football going to prioritise? What's the priority right now for women's football? And is it the medical, the infrastructure, the training facilities, all those things to nullify injuries and all of that, I think is ultimately going to impact what is delivered on the pitch. So fundamentally, that's what we have to look at first and keep building that up and keep building, like I said, that parity between the clubs that are sitting in survival mode in the WSL and the clubs that are in the top fighting for titles.
And you've seen that when you worked at Bristol as well in your coach role there. The difference, say for example, you being at Villa the season before that and then going into Bristol, how different was that from like a professional standard?
Yeah, I think Bristol was a very unique club in that sense. You know, they know that they can't compete in terms of budget with the top end of the clubs, but their way of trying to be resourceful and gain those kind of advantages was integrating the women's team into the first team men's setup in the club, so that it just felt like one club. You know, as staff, we were, you know, open plan building. We can interact, we can gain knowledge, share knowledge, all of that. They were trying to play games out of Ashton Gate. As we know, they had some of the highest attendances in WSL last season as well.
Which is unbelievable.
Yeah. So I think they were trying to make the most and do the best with the resources available to them. You know, the biggest difference for us at Villa was a newly promoted side. We had the pressure and the stress of trying to stay in the top division and compete week on, week out with a team that was full of experienced players, inexperienced players, international players, you know, a young coach in my first season there. And obviously then when Carla Ward took over, it was just a case of a bit of survival again, wasn't it? I think, you know, we had lots of challenges on and off the pitch. And that was the sort of thing we had to navigate. But it's always tough, I think, for newly promoted sides because they've got no vast experience of that level. So you're quickly catching up to that level and finding out what is it.
Yeah. What's your nickname for Carla Ward?
Wardiola. Is that?
Wardiola.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's good. It flows well.
Well, she's got a
she's been away
US Olympics medal around her neck.
I know.
We need to get her on the show.
We need to get her on the show, actually.
I want to see that medal as well.
Yeah, I know. Apparently, that's a shame. Apparently, the Emma Hayes and the backroom staff didn't get the actual gold medal.
What?
They got another version of a medal.
You joking?
I think they right. They didn't work a ball. They don't deserve it. It's fine.
Emma Hayes hung it up on over her kitchen sink, didn't she? That she normally does, where she hangs her medal. And it was just, I was like, honey, that ain't no Olympic gold.
Really?
Not what that is.
Oh my gosh.
That was like, thanks for coming, medal.
I'd be raging. I mean,
I'd be like,
who do we call?
As Emma Hayes didn't launch it as someone.
Yeah.
Anywho, just quickly before we move on, Arsenal have signed Mariona Caldente. She's won a couple of Champions Leagues. I'm hearing through multiple sources that she's an unbelievable player in training. Her standard is exceptional. The players that are coming to the WSL and the Championship is quite exciting as well. Is that the first priority for a club, to sign a big name?
Massively. It's a statement signing and one they had to make, in my opinion, because you're losing a player of the quality of Viviana Miedema, you know, the all-time WSL goal scorer. You need someone who's going to come in with that kind of calibre, that winning experience, you know, has won Champions League, is a World Cup winner, is also, I think she is like the 5th all-time goal scorer at Barcelona. She's bringing in that kind of leadership quality in that position as well, and a creativity, hopefully, that she can create in there. But for me, it's so exciting to see a player like that, and it's going to be exciting to see whether the other players are like on her wavelength.
Interesting you say that, because I won't say who said this to me, but one of the girls were actually at, I will not throw anyone under the bus. But apparently watched the game recently at Bournemouth and said that Caldente looked as though she was on a different level from the players in her own team, that people just were not on her wavelength. And I'm like, it's amazing. It's going to be so good to see her. I've obviously seen her play a few times, and she's just constantly moving, looking for the ball, turning, getting up. She's just a quality player, so it's going to be so exciting to see her. Hopefully Arsenal can keep her fit, and it'll be interesting to see how the players adapt around her, because I take it she's going to be the playmaker now. She's got to be, Yeah,
and it's also that idea of like her identity is so linked to that Barca style of play, and all those players are sort of born into that identity. So how she'll cope with that in the WSL, which we know you kind of got to be adaptable as well. It's not always possession based. Sometimes it's counter attack, and sometimes it's quite physical. You know, how she copes with that. But I think her movement is and her intellect, you know, as a footballer is super, is world class, really.
Do you think she'll be happy with a County Cup?
No. No. People don't want more than a County Cup. 100%.
She will. So it'll be interesting to see how Arsenal can crack on in other competitions, you know. Will she get frustrated? She's been playing with players around her also. Pateas, Bonmati, players like that, that's the kind of quality she's been around. And I'm not saying Arsenal don't have that quality, but it's different. It's totally different. People have actually been saying, I'm Caldente of the Championship.
No, they haven't. No one's ever said that.
No one said that.
Absolutely. Miles off it.